Few people are aware of the evil things Julius Caesar did. They are often presented as a footnote. Of course, a hero is just a villain to the other side, but from many points of view, Caesar ended up being considered by many a villain by his side as well. Most of his life, he was in huge debt, which is not a bad thing in itself, but he would borrow your money and then throw public spectacles to brag and earn fame. But we are getting ahead of the story. I'll start with a personal theory, then we will go into facts. Feel free to challenge this theory in the comment section below, or if you want to skip it, you can go to the Triumvirate chapter. In 75 BCE, when Caesar was just 25 years old, he was kidnapped by pirates. Surprisingly, during his captivity, the pirates treated him quite well, as Caesar himself tells us. They demanded a ransom for his release, 20 talents, which by rough calculation is about 520 kilograms of silver. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of negotiating to lower the ransom, Caesar did the opposite. He told the pirates they were undervaluing him and that they should demand 50 talents instead. Naturally, they agreed. The conventional story goes that Caesar did this in order to mock the pirates, or that he knew his worth, his prestige, and demanded the respect that came with it. While in captivity, Caesar told the pirates he would return after his release to capture and crucify them. The pirates laughed it off as a joke, but once freed, he actually raised a naval fleet, tracked down the pirates, captured them, and true to his word, crucified them all, but not before cutting their throats, supposedly as an act of mercy because they had treated him well. Now, here comes the twist no one talks about. We know Julius Caesar was in debt for much of his life. We also know he was a good strategist, always thinking several moves ahead. So what if his insistence on raising the ransom wasn't just about his self-worth, but was a clever money-making scheme? Consider this. Caesar knew from the start that he would return to capture the pirates. When he did, perhaps he didn't find all the silver they'd collected, and before he crucified the pirates, he had their throats cut. But what if this wasn't just mercy? What if it was also a way to ensure their silence? After all, pirates nailed alive to crosses could have revealed how much of the silver was actually spent, potentially exposing how much Caesar kept for himself. I say it's a possibility worth considering. But let's get into the facts now. 60 BCE. The government Rome had was the Senate, which was split in three main groups: Cicero's faction, Pompey's faction, and Crassus's faction. No laws are passing because two of the most powerful men in the Republic, Crassus and Pompey, were locked in conflict. So if one proposed something, the other one would reject the proposal. In order to solve this issue, Caesar proposed something that would destroy every republic value or principle. He proposed a triumvirate, a political alliance where these two rivals would work together, but with an addition: Caesar himself as a consul, to balance the power, at least in theory, because in practice Crassus and Pompey had good reputations in Rome, so they didn't want to stain their names with despicable acts in order to pass laws. But Caesar, already being in a lot of debts to Crassus and with nothing to lose, offers himself as a puppet ruler, and he would do anything Crassus and Pompey want, just so he has the image of a powerful man. The consul function can be translated into the president function today. But instead of one president, you would have two presidents. The idea was that if one tried to reach too much power, the other one could stop him. The other consul that could stop Caesar was marginalized so much that he didn't even bother to go into the Senate anymore, as he was simply ignored or even physically bullied by Caesar's supporters when he was there. During his time as a consul, Caesar used violence and intimidation in order to pass laws. His opponents were physically attacked or silenced. Remember, this was the Roman Republic where the Senate should decide what happened, and Caesar totally ignored them. Typically, after a consul's term ended, they were assigned one province to govern. During this time, the governor would fill his pockets by stripping the province of his wealth. Instead, Caesar was initially assigned to guard the forests. However, by pulling some strings, he secured an unprecedented deal that really wasn't in the legal book. He was granted 3 provinces: Transalpine Gaul, Cisalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. Then, instead of 1 year as it was customary, he got 5 years. After that, it was extended to 5 more years. Why did he needed this so much? Because while having this kind of high jobs granted legal immunity. As soon as Caesar would lose one high office function, he would stand trial for what he did when he was a consul. As governor, Caesar needed to appoint officials to key positions in these provinces. These jobs were highly desired by senators because they provided opportunities for wealth and fame. However, Caesar's reputation was so bad that almost nobody wanted to work with him in these provinces. His reputation for bending the rules, intimidating opponents, and consolidating power made him an unpopular figure among the political elite. 58 BCE, Caesar has a plan that he considers brilliant. Some tribes try to leave their land and go into Gaul, as probably in their area was overpopulation. In order to be sure they won't ever return, they burned their homes and took everything they had of value with them. There is just a small problem. These 368,000 people have to pass through Rome territory, more exactly one of Caesar's provinces. These are not all warriors. There are also unarmed women, kids, and old men. They promise not to raid anything while they pass through, but Caesar has a brilliant plan: to kill, enslave, take their personal belongings, and sell them into slavery in Rome. Here is the problem with Caesar's conquest. He didn't fight an organized entity as Alexander the Great fought the Persian Empire, but in his conquest of Gaul, he fought divided tribes that would unite on occasions. This was a huge genocide from many points of view, as there are occasions when tribes are surrendering, they do provide hostages, promise to live in peace, and Caesar would kill and enslave them anyway. Also, he would gain some extra money at the end of the day. Even Caesar admits that these people fought for their freedom, but their freedom were against the interests of Rome. Given the fact that these wars were not authorized by the Senate, as he went to war illegally on his own decision, we can say that their freedom were against the interests of Caesar. During this war, he killed 1 million Gauls and enslaved one more. That is 5% of world population at that time and 20% of the population of Gaul. In 49 BCE, Caesar understood the consequences of his actions. If he returned to Rome without the legal immunity his political roles had provided until now, he would face trials for his deeds. To avoid this, he made a daring decision. He crossed the Rubicon River, effectively declaring war on Rome itself. This bold move led to a civil war, as he needs to kill Romans now in order to save his own skin. As we all know, Caesar ultimately won, allowing him to take control of Rome and appoint himself as dictator. Doing that, he wasn't an outlaw anymore, since he was the government now. In 44 BCE, there is a talk about abolishing debts, but Honorable Caesar says that he can't pass this law, because he is the most in-debt man in Rome, so it would be unfair to pass it, as it would benefit him the most. What does this tell us? It tells us that after staying 10 years in provinces instead of one, filling his pockets, then stripping Gaul of his wealth, selling slaves, and being dictator for another 5 years, it still wasn't enough for him to pay his debts. Caesar declared himself dictator for life, a move that was deeply controversial. By doing so, he granted himself permanent immunity from prosecution for all his past actions. This concentration of power outraged many in Rome, as it was seen as a direct threat to the Republic's principles. It was this very act that led to his assassination, as his enemies believed his death was the only way to restore the Republic. I've made a list of possible trials awaiting for Caesar in Rome. Using mob violence during his consulship in order to pass laws. Ignoring the Senate and tribunes' authority. He bypassed the Senate repeatedly, using popular assemblies to push through legislation. Crimes against fellow magistrates. His treatment of his co-consul colleague, who he intimidated into withdrawing from public life. Illegal warfare against Gaul. Starting unauthorized wars in Gaul to expand his personal power and wealth. Plunder and financial mismanagement, as he did not fully report it or properly distributed to Rome the plunder. Mass killing, enslavement of hundreds of thousands of Gauls. Exceeding his term as proconsul, arguably he was illegally keeping his own function even though his term was over. This was a civilian leading armies now. Refusal to disband armies. Was asked repeatedly by the Senate to disband his army and refused. Manipulation of Roman law, exploiting laws in order to undermine the Republic. Treason, for undermining the Republic's authority, corruption for financial irregularities, abuse of power, for many of his actions during the consulship. For all these reasons, Caesar would possibly face exile, confiscation of wealth, or even execution. Caesar's actions were not necessarily those of a great hero, but of a man who lived life on the edge. He often found himself cornered by his choices, leaving no alternatives but to take bold, risky paths, as he really had nothing to lose most of the time. On one occasion, before an election, Caesar told his mother that he would either be a winner or an exiled, once again highlighting the extreme approach he took to political life in Rome. In the end, these decisions ultimately led him down a road where his death became inevitable. I know this might be a controversial topic, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and share. It really helps as we are a small channel and appreciate all the support we can get. Thank you for watching.